Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mile High podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, and I'm grateful to have you as part of our audience. Thank you for listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, YouTube. We're glad to now see that we've been downloaded in 35 different countries, and this podcast is available worldwide. And if you are a first-time listener, we'd love to have you find us on iTunes, subscribe so you can stay in with all things Mile High. This is going to be a very exciting podcast episode today on science and research. And I know sometimes people think that's not necessarily exciting, but you will find it exciting, I'm telling you. And we also want to say, mark your calendar in permanent ink for Mile High 5, which is going to be 2017, August 17th to 21st. August 17th to 21st. Be there, Colorado. It is the event of the year, many are saying. People talk about it. It is the most talked about event in chiropractic right now. You want to be there, and I look forward to you joining us. So today, we have a researcher who has done some incredible work for the chiropractic profession, and the Association for Reorganizational Healing Practices is a big part of the Mile High movement. And Srideep Musuvathy has done research for the Global Gateway Foundation that's very dear to chiropractic and to the Association for Reorganizational Healing Practices. He studied electrical engineering at the University of Southern California and did his dissertation on this work that you're going to find fascinating. Welcome to the Mile High podcast, Srideep.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for the introduction.
We're glad to have you here. And first of all, let's just ask you this, since we have a large chiropractic audience and non-chiropractors, what's your connection to your personal experience with chiropractic?
So, the way I got into chiropractic is not the typical way most people got into chiropractic. I was a grad student at University of Southern California, USC, and I was talking to my professor and he said, I have interesting data that I want you to look at. It's from the spine and it's been collected using electromyography sensors, so sensors that pick up electrical activity of the muscles and the nerves. And I won't tell you what's happening in there, but go analyze the data, see what's happening. And so that's how I started. And after a few months of doing all the analysis and finding some fascinating phenomenon going on there, I was curious and I wanted to know what's happening, where the data is coming from. I said, would you like to go see? So I went to a network chiropractor's office in Southern California, and that's when I was exposed to this, and I got on the table, experienced it the first time, and since then I've been on and off, and now I regularly am a part of the local network chiropractic office here.
Well,
so that's how I got involved.
And that is a unique journey. You're right. It is not the typical way. Someone looking at electrical data relative to the spine and nerve system and then seeing that is fascinating. And I got to see what's going on here. So on that note, let's start there because this will be fun. When you first saw this data, what was it? What was interesting to you?
So this data was collected using 4 sensors along the spine, one at the neck and all the way down, 4 sensors to the sacrum. And we were looking at dynamic EMG, which is essentially EMG data that is recorded over time. So you're not just looking at a specific muscle tension at one instant of time, but seeing what's happening over time. And as I was looking at these 4 streams of data coming from each of these sensors, you could see the bursting pattern reveal a wave that was going up and down the spine. That was the first analysis that I saw, that there was a wave, and I was curious what creates this beautiful wave that is going up and down the spine. And so that for me was interesting, as I was saying, is the I know it was a human spine, so I knew it was not like a fish swimming or a salamander swimming or walking on the ground. So I was curious about what was happening in there, what creates such a beautiful wave that
Now, just to
typically pull out a video.
clarify for people listening that might be driving,
Yeah.
to clarify, when you say you saw a beautiful wave, you were looking at the data,
Yes.
not a person on a table.
No, it's not on the table. It's not a video recording. It is just a bursting pattern of the data that when you analyze, you see there's a wave.
That's fascinating.
That is fascinating. And one of the things we've done is compared people expressing this wave versus asking someone to fake a wave, and you know it's not the same. The bursting, the quality of the data is very different. So this is a naturally occurring phenomena that really can't be faked as far as we know.
Okay, so now on that note, so looking back to your perspective, your window of view at that point, right? So you're looking at this data. What were your first? It's a wave pattern. It's not a fish. It's a human. What are you thinking?
Uh, well, to I'm thinking a lot of surprised swear words, but uh, that out. I mean, it's just sheer surprise. Like, what creates this kind of wave? Uh, can somebody fake this phenomena so beautifully, or is something else eliciting this? And so that was the first thought that
Got it.
crossed my mind.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. Got it. Okay. So now let's fast forward. So then you participated in research collecting this data. Tell me about that. So you did research. So I'll lay this out a little bit. Some people listening to this to me the first time they heard it, some will be familiar. You've done research relative to and published papers relative to a central pattern generator. And we'll talk about what that means. But where did that start? You started collecting data about people getting checked. Explain that.
Okay. So, um, okay. The big problem with understanding what happens with humans and healing and biomechanics is that you want to be as minimally invasive as possible. You don't want to get in the way of people naturally moving.
Right.
But if you try to be restricted with sensors that only do non-invasive data collection, you cannot get the entire picture of what's happening. Here's a simple example of what happens with the heart. I'm taking a different example. We don't exactly know all the things that affect the heart rate and the functioning of the heart. And if you want to be as minimally invasive possible, you have to stick these sensors on the surface of the skin and let people's heart function normally. But if you do that, you only get certain uh, limited views into what is happening. So this is the big challenge. You clearly cannot cut it open all the time because then you cannot have normal functioning.
Right.
You cannot look at cadavers because they're not moving, they're not alive. So what do? You do these minimally invasive uh, sensor streams like surface EMGs, which are just antenna that is stuck on the surface of the skin, and below the skin is all the tissue and the muscles, and then the nerves connecting to the muscles. So you say, if you have this very limited view, what can you say about what's happening? So this is the big challenge. So this is what we end up doing. We put surface electromyographic sensors and we look at data streams and see if you see the electrical activity changing over time and you are aware of the fact that this data is being filtered through all these tissues and there's noise and there's movement artifact because somebody just turned their head or the skin was too tight, or the glue was not proper. You take into consideration all these facts and say, what do these streams of data reveal? If you do some processing on the data, you begin to see certain patterns of oscillations in in response to the network care. So somebody makes a network contact, and the different gateways begin to oscillate, and they generate these spikes. And if you analyze the spikes to see what patterns are being revealed, you begin to notice that these oscillations have a certain pattern, and depending on the location of the spine, might be slightly different patterns. So we try to understand what was generating these patterns of oscillations. One of the things we've known from other organisms like fishes and snakes and salamanders is that there's a circuitry in the spinal cord that's called a central pattern generator. It's a small grouping of neurons that are somehow connected to each other, and when they start firing, they reinforce each other and they fire in a circular pattern, and they generate these beautiful oscillations that are usually used for locomotion. The most interesting thing is with salamanders because they're amphibians and they have a certain pattern of oscillations in the spine when they're swimming, and when they switch over from swimming to walking as they move into land, a different pattern engages. Now, all of this happens only in the spine, right? Something might trigger it. There might be a signal that comes down from the brain that triggers it, but once it's engaged, it's completely self-contained in the spine. And we knew that whatever was happening in the spine was contained to the spine from the NSA oscillation, because you could see these oscillations being revealed in quadriplegic subjects. These are people who had accidents, were paralyzed neck down, who cannot voluntarily move. And when they were in care for a while, they began to access these oscillations in the spine. And so our hypothesis was, could this be a central pattern generator? The issue was we had not seen evidence of central pattern generators in humans as much. So this became one of the first two studies that hinted at the fact that not only do fishes and salamanders and these simpler life forms have central pattern generators, but humans could. So in that sense, it's fascinating. The other study was with human locomotion, where some of the researchers had proposed there are central pattern generators in the lower limbs of the spinal circuitry connecting to the lower limbs that was generating these gaits in humans.
So I want to say something and define some terms for people before we go further. And so here you are, you're a research scientist, you get this bunch of data, and you're like, there's waves moving through a spine,
Yeah,
and you begin studying it. And
yeah,
so these are people receiving network spinal analysis care,
yes,
forces applied to their spine. So this is fascinating to chiropractors around the world. And then there's this thing called a central pattern generator, and let's define that more in a moment, that has been seen in other reptiles, animals, but not in humans. Okay, and now you're seeing that people have these oscillations on these readings on the other side of lesions of people that have quadriplegia.
yeah,
Okay, so that of itself is amazing, and it breaks many neurological models. Correct?
yeah. Yeah, it's surprising. So we did not expect to see central pattern generators in humans. So the fact that you could have oscillations on the other side of the lesions was in fact fascinating. Yeah,
Right. So that's fascinating worldwide in neuroscience. I mean,
yeah.
right. So this is a whole neurological phenomenon that would not have been anticipated. And to see that from a chiropractic application is tremendous. Now, so let's help people understand what is a central pattern generator.
So yeah, central pattern generator is just a simple circuitry embedded in your spine, and this can generate oscillations that have a certain pattern that repeats over and over itself, and it keeps going unless there's another impulse to stop it or prevent it or switch it. It's self-contained. It's within the spine. It does this repeated pattern of oscillation via the circuitry uh, as long as it needs to go. So that's what a central pattern generator is.
Okay, and central pattern generators have been seen in what other?
They've seen in fishes, a few snakes, um, salamanders. So basically anything that has this rhythmic movement and oscillations, that is being used for locomotion. And usually we've seen it in locomotion.
Right. And so what does that mean that that has not and we hadn't seen it in humans at all before?
That is right, yes.
Right, that's
But there was
correct. Okay.
suggestion that there might be central pattern generators that was responsible for the gait in humans. But we have not been able to pick out the exact location or the nature of the circuitry.
Okay, so this is a first. Now, what does it mean that that is not produced without someone doing a network spinal analysis adjustment, or am I not, or am I misquoting that?
Um, a, if it is true that gait is resulting from central pattern generators, it means that we can access and generate it. It just happens at an unconscious level. We don't
Okay,
think about how we engage as oscillators.
right.
So it's as if we're saying there's all this oscillating circuitry or circuitry that results in oscillations of the spine, and all you do is engage these different circuitries. And by combining these different oscillations, we generate complex movements, but we don't really think about it.
Got it. Got it. So, and when you see this, what does this tell us anything about how the body heals?
No, but the subsequent studies that built on the CPGs begins to tell you what is happening. So for a wave to occur, there needs to be an oscillation.
Right.
Signal pattern generators are creating these oscillations. What we have seen is when you look at people with quadriplegia, where there's lesions, or if there is people who are just beginning care, and you look at the starting at certain levels of care, you begin to see multiple oscillators that are being engaged. And in the beginning, these oscillators are doing their own thing, and there's no clear wave, or there's a wave traveling and it collapses and disappears and whatnot. And as care progresses, as people begin to feel better, as they've been in care longer, these different oscillators begin to somehow communicate with each other or exchange energy with each other. And then what happens is that the nature of the oscillation begins to change. And this leads to a new level of organization where the two independently behaving oscillations become one bigger system where they are dancing together in a nice way. So, really back to the roots of the word healing, it's the idea of becoming whole. It's these different components coherently, or speaking in non-technical way, behaving very synchronously, where it's oscillating in tandem and they're exchanging information, energy, and doing a larger behavior in a larger, the neck and the sacrum are talking to each other, and they're oscillating in a way that is responding to the other. So
Okay.
seems to correlate with well-being and healing.
Okay. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I'm clear about this.
Yeah.
So you see over a course of time or care
Mm-hmm.
and progression that there's an improvement or increase in energy information exchange.
Yes, that
Okay.
is correct.
And so to see that and mathematically be able to say that's happening, that in of itself is tremendous.
Yes, it is very much so. Yeah.
It's not something to be minimized. To see that there's oscillation that happens at these different central pattern generators and they actually synchronize, correct?
Yes, very
They,
much so. Yeah.
they synchronize and they have a greater exchange of energy and information in the human body, which would mean an improvement to me towards wholeness
Absolutely.
and better
Yes.
function. Right.
And in fact, one of the things that results is this standing wave pattern on the spine, which in itself is fascinating because the spine can have a standing wave, which is you typically see standing waves, say, on the surface of the water, where you drop a stone and the wave travels out as ripples. It hits a wall and it reflects back. And at the right combination, where the reflected wave, which is coming back in one direction, the forward wave, they have the exact amount of amplitude, the exact timing, so that the whole lake, the waves stop moving and they just go up and down. This is called the standing wave pattern. You see that in the human spine when the two oscillators are perfectly engaged. And this is amazing for several reasons. One, the fact that you can have a standing wave pattern on the spine. And two, this means that the two oscillators are perfectly communicating and they are behaving in almost the exact ways. And these are oscillators and circuitry at different parts of the spine. We know the musculature is different, and we know all the nervous impulses going on different. And yet you see this amazing standing wave pattern, which is one of the first we've ever seen anywhere.
So, and to define that, what does a standing wave mean?
A standing wave is two waves traveling in opposite directions where they are exactly opposite in the sense that when one of the waves is going down, the opposing wave is going up at certain points. So at some point along the whole space spectrum, there's uh, places where these waves cancel each other out. And then the rest of the places, rather than the waves moving back and forth, you just see an up and down movement.
Right.
You see that on the water. Sometimes the whole water's going up and
Right.
down without the actual wave moving.
Got it. Got
Yeah,
it. And that is being seen mathematically in the data.
absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, then what is a traveling wave?
A traveling wave is where the energy is moving in space and time. So if you just drop a stone in a pond, as the rivers move out, this is what you call a traveling wave, where there's a peak and the peak just travels outwards. So that would be traveling.
Got
And
it.
to have a standing wave, you need two traveling waves that are exactly similar, but somehow opposite directions.
Now, can you say anything about what's significant about each of those?
So a traveling wave happens when there's an oscillation and medium to travel, send the energy out. The standing wave occurs when two traveling waves talk to each other in a very specific way. This is why it's so significant. That even you could have two waves that are not completely synchronous, and then you won't get a standing wave. So for standing wave, to see a standing wave, it means the two oscillators somehow engage in the medium and they are perfectly synchronized. It means they're somehow exchanging energy with each other. So when you see a standing wave, you can start to think about coherence happening, which means that two different parts of the system that are oscillating by itself are somehow merged to become a bigger system.
Excellent, excellent. So now, I would imagine
Yeah,
in your background, right, to be exposed to this and to dive into this and to be collecting this information, that would be a big jump or something new or novel.
yeah.
And then I would imagine that there'd be some challenges in conducting this kind of research.
Right.
What would some of those be?
The biggest challenge is you want to be as minimally invasive as possible, as I said before. And the other big challenge is we don't fully understand how the human body works, or for that matter, how any of the living systems work. There's a lot of different factors that affect how living systems respond. Now, I'm an engineer, so the way we look at things is you have these little machines, and you can isolate everything. You can remove all the external interference, and you can put in the desired signal you want in, and out comes a response, and you get a real good understanding of what is happening there. This is simply not possible in uh, living systems, even something as simple as a bacterium, let alone a human multicellular complex organism. So the challenge is how do we understand what's happening with all this, such limited information. To do that, I always rely on systems theory, this generalizing the ideas of what happens when different components connected with each other begin to send information through these connections and exchange energy back and forth. The reason I this is because one, it simplifies and it abstracts out the complex. So rather than looking at specific biological and chemical or physiological models, you just be asked what's an oscillator on the spine. I don't know what's the exact details of the neurology that's creating the oscillation. I know there's an oscillator that behaves like that. So abstract out, make an oscillator, make take the connection to be just something that can transfer information and see an oscillator And I can build these interesting models and say a lot more about healing without ignoring the fine details of the biochemistry of the physiology of the body.
Right.
So this is the challenge. This is how I will overcome it. The other reason why this theory is fascinating is because once you understand what is happening here and how the connection is improving, how healing is happening in the body, you take the exact system theory model and apply to something that seems completely irrelevant, but is behaving similarly. For example, the economy, where the different systems are talking to each other and there's exchange of the money, information going on, and you ask the questions of how can we take what we're doing with healing a body and apply it to something, or maybe heal the economy, or heal political system. And for me, that has a lot of value.
Now, so looking at that, that means system theory becomes very important. People listening to this, what would be a great resource to learn more about systems theory on a basic level?
I think there are some general engineering system theory with the we started up nowadays. Um, so, I mean, my immediate go-to is Wikipedia, which always starts explaining things in a very basic manner and figure. The
Okay.
other nice thing about system theory that's happening now is that almost everyone who's doing research in economics and finance and biology, they're all beginning to rely on system theory. So the bad news is that we are not yet at a place where there's general, simple systems theoretic books that are coming out explaining systems theory. But the good news is that I think we're going to see one of the things very soon. But until then, I would say just go online, look for Google search or whatever search for system theory.
And what about we'll put in the blog notes for this the link to central pattern generator information also. Let me ask you this, especially for people that may not be network spinal analysis familiar, okay? Is that a central concept in chiropractic? In fact, a foundational concept is that we want to see less interference. We don't want to see interference in the central nervous system. And we want to see that there's greater levels of organization. That when a person is healthy and well and at 100% health in a philosophical, abstract way, then there's maximal organization to their body, right? Does this tell you anything about organization or interference?
The interference, I don't know, but I suspect the fact that certain oscillators or parts of the body, as they become more and more synchronized and coherent, the connection between them strengthens, which makes it less susceptible or less sensitive to noise coming from outside, which you would think of as interference. Or there is interference, somehow the high level of organization know how to deal with it.
Got it.
The greater level of organization is always nice because we know that more and more organization happens, it gets more and more efficient. There's a reason why we want to go bigger and bigger. There's a reason why we want to live in villages, but we want to live in nation states. There's a reason why we want to have this big power grid and not have individual generators everybody's house, because the bigger the organization, the more robust you get, the better you can recognize, the more efficient you get, the more you can transfer resources around. When one of the subsystems is not using the resources, you can transfer the energy to other parts. So high level of organization is always nice, provided we know there is a nice or even seamless way to do this.
Got it.
So in that sense, I think the idea of rejecting just the development of coherence and high level of organization addresses both interference and high levels of organization.
And we've used a term a couple times that maybe we should define also, which is coherence. We've used the
Yes.
term coherence a little bit. Let's talk about what does coherence mean, and part two. So let's start with what does coherence mean, but then let's lead into what coherence at a distance is, because we've seen that, right? So of all, for people, what does coherence mean from an engineering standpoint?
So in the strictest definition, coherence means there are two or more oscillators that are oscillating with the exact frequencies, and they're exactly swapped or exactly the same. So they either go up and go down at the same time, or when one goes up, they perfectly go down. This is the
Got it.
strictest extent. And this happens when there's what we call a linear connection between two oscillators. But the more general, as we study more complex systems, and there are some areas of dynamic systems theory in mathematics and engineering where this is too strict a definition. So we loosen it to say coherence means that two subsystems, not necessarily oscillators, are behaving in a very similar manner.
Okay.
They're somehow synchronized in the way they are behaving. So when one goes up, the other is also responding appropriately. There's almost no time delay.
Great. Now,
And that's coherence. And coherence is the distance.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yes.
Before we get to coherence at distance, before you add another layer, what's important or what's of value about coherence in the human body?
Value of the coherence in the human body is that now seemingly disconnected parts of the human body are now be able to respond to each other's behavior. So as if the body is not disconnected anymore. It's different parts of the body are able to share information and resources with each other very efficiently. That's
got it. Share energy information efficiently. So then coherence at distance, because then we've said that this research, one of the conclusions was that there's coherence at a distance happening. So what does that mean?
So in the beginning, when we look at oscillators, two oscillators very close by may be completely coherent. This is very easy to achieve. But when you talk of things like oscillator at the top of the neck and oscillator at the sacrum, and you see that they're coherent, you're beginning to talk about very large distances from a neurological point of view, because there's all these musculature and the bones and tissues at there's space between these two oscillators. And for these two oscillators to be able to communicate efficiently with each other, it's a whole nother layer of complexity that's being added here. The coherence at a distance is where two oscillators at a significant distance, that would obviously depend on the system you're talking about here, the human body. That would be coherence at a distance, where two surprisingly far away oscillators behave exactly the same. The question is, does this extend beyond the body? We don't have a concrete answer yet. Can oscillators that are necessarily not connected within a single body, can they achieve coherence, and what would that mean? And we don't know the answer to that.
Now, from a science point of view, this is all significant to neuroscience.
Very much, yes.
And neurophysiology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if we want to put our, how do people learn to think like a scientist when they're looking at this? Because people tend to look at this emotionally. Like, how should they look at this and from a science standpoint? How can they put their science hat on to do that?
One of the most difficult things I encounter, and I sometimes even lament about, is how people love to see scientific proof to things and the scientific truth. And it's always tricky because scientists never prove anything. In fact, we disprove things, right? Because it's inherently difficult. We start off with assumptions, which almost nobody is going to communicate. Once we make all these assumptions, we start asking very deep, interesting questions that can give us a meaningful answer. And in fact, I think that is the most difficult part of all of science, is to ask the right questions. Most of us, in my opinion, are scientists or aspiring scientists, because we're constantly trying to ask these interesting questions. Maybe you decided to organize your desk. You made a bunch of assumptions, and you said, what is it that is the most valuable? What is it that I want to have accessible to me? And what is the best way I can organize my desk in order to achieve the goal I want? So here are the themes of what is happening, and I'm going to take this idea to see what scientists do. The purpose of all of science is two things, right? You want to predict and you want to control. Predict means you want to know what is happening in the future. And we all assume if you knew what happens in the past, it's a good indicator of what's going to happen in the future. So this is what we do with data collection. We collect data and we look at the data and we say, this is what it did in the past. Maybe this is what it will always do. And sometimes it's a good assumption, sometimes it's not. Anybody who's invested in the stock market knows it's not a good assumption. Right? And to control means if you know how the system is going to behave in the future, if you knew what your desk will look like in the future, what you would need in the future, and if it's not what it is, you want to make it into what you want it to be. That's essentially control. This is why we do all of science. So the first step to all of science is to ask these interesting questions, and then based on these questions, we build these what we call models that will help us predict. And then we have to test these models. So we take this model, and the model predicts something. It says the system should behave in a way. We test it, we collect data, and if it doesn't do what we thought it should do, we've disproved it. And that's all science can do. If we test it and the system does exactly what we thought it would do, we are a little more confident in our model. So we've not proved it, but we believe it to be true a little more. So this is what scientists are doing all the time. We're asking great questions. We're stopping to make sure we've asked great questions. We try to see whether we can find out whether this question gives us meaningful insights. And if so, we become a little more confident and we keep going on and on until we can get something useful out of it.
So here you are, to sum up this together, you're a scientist, mechanical engineering, you get exposed to this data to look at, possibly study, and you find out it's a wave moving through the spine, which didn't
Yeah.
even know that even is possible, right?
Yeah.
And then to fast forward, we can surmise from this data a couple things. One, and if I'm wrong, or if there's something in addition we can surmise, correct me. There's evidence of a central pattern generator in the human spine.
Mm-hmm.
We see greater or increased organization,
Yes.
okay, mathematically,
Yes.
from the data, that as a person receives this intervention, they get greater levels of organization than they had prior, consistently.
Yes.
Two, we see that if you try to fake the movement or wave, or three, I guess, if we try to fake the movement or wave, it's not the same information mathematically.
Correct.
It's completely different.
It's completely different. It's mostly noise. There's no coherence coming out.
And there's no coherence. And then we also see through this intervention, mathematically, that coherence increases.
Yes.
Increases would be an appropriate term.
Right. Right.
Okay. And even coherence at a distance.
Even coherence at a distance. And this the implications require there's a greater level of organization,
Right.
which is suddenly correlating with health. Taking subjective quality of life analysis seem to agree that their quality of life and health is improving as coherence is going on. So that's
As
why.
coherence is going on. And we even see this happen on other sides of quadriplegia.
We've seen this happen in quadriplegic, and we've seen that quadriplegic whose coherence is increasing are beginning to show some movement, maybe in the center or other places where there's signs of recovery of movement.
So, and now, did I surmise all the conclusions, or are there other ones as well?
Yes, that was all of it. Yeah.
That's all of them. We don't need more. That's significant.
That's highly significant. Hopefully, we will have more
for the
soon.
work you've done, and I will tell you, in terms of someone who I have a science background and find science fascinating, and a chiropractor. I really appreciate you putting all the effort, energy over these years to do this, because it brings something very valuable to the scientific community and to the chiropractic community, and there's certainly an overlap between two, obviously. And on that, what if you were to, like, look ahead, what were some other questions that you would ask about this, or what you would like to see, like this is the potential if we keep doing this?
So the big vision for me is in two directions. One is in terms of healing, what is happening with coherence and what is creating coherence in the human body, and why is it responsible for creating better quality of life and health. And that's something I would like to go down to the mechanics of what is happening with the human body. That's one. And the other is to take these ideas of development of coherence and the development of wholeness and begin to apply to things that are not just humans. And so we make better and better. It can be achieved using principles. These are two directions.
Well, that would be pretty fascinating. Well, thank you for being part of the Mile High podcast. Thank you for your contribution to research, and specifically chiropractic research, and particularly chiropractic research relative to NSA. And very fascinating. I find this very interesting. We'll put in the notes, so people know, in the blog notes that go along with the podcast. We'll put your biographical information, some links to some of this research, people can get abstracts, and maybe even some things where they can find out more about systems theory and pattern generator, so that people that find it interesting can delve a little deeper. And thank you for being part of the Mile podcast, and really appreciate what you're doing and continue to do. I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you so much, Dan, for giving me the opportunity to share things that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, good. And it's fun. And thank everyone for tuning in. If you to this podcast, listen to more of my podcast. There's an incredible library that has grown, and you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher, on YouTube and Facebook. If you're at the channel, subscribe. And if you enjoy this and find this fascinating, please leave your feedback about that. I would love to have more stellar feedback on iTunes, for example, and share this podcast with your friends. Just click share and share with others if you want to know more information about cutting edge neuroscience. And join us at Mile High 2017, August 17th to 20th, 2017, www.milehighcar.org, where you can register. Have an excellent day and keep changing lives and contributing to growth. Like our page on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Mile High Chiro.